Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today, we're going to dive into a heartfelt story about love, hardship, and the little moments that make life meaningful. From a lonely man connecting with a paralyzed dog, to a couple working together through struggles, returning to their old home, and discovering unexpected joys and challenges along the way. You'll witness tender moments in their garden, confrontations with the past, and the unwavering love that binds them through storms and uncertainties. If you enjoy this journey of emotions and hope, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss any of the upcoming videos. The sunlight poured down like honey onto the red dirt road leading to the old house by the riverbank. The air was so still that every rustle of wind threading through the row of coconut trees could be heard clearly. On the crooked front steps sat a man, motionless, his shoulders slightly drooping, as if carrying the entire weight of a sorrowful sky. Right in front of him was a small dog, its hind legs dragging on the ground, growling sharply as though trying to tear the silence apart. Yet strangely, the man was not angry at all. He only looked at it with sad, gentle eyes, then gave a tired little smile. "You're fierce, huh? I just came to find your owner, that's all." He extended his hand, the calloused, scarred hand of a man who had worked as a hired laborer year-round. The dog shrank back, eyes filled with wariness and fear, but he stayed seated there, letting the midday sun pour sweat in rivulets down his sun-darkened cheeks. He began speaking to the dog as one would to an old friend not seen in years. "Little one, I'm so sad. My family has completely fallen apart." Wind from the river blew back toward the steps, carrying the faint coolness of late afternoon. He took a fruit from his pocket, placed it on the ground, then slowly poured water into a chipped bowl. The dog kept watching him, but the growling had stopped. After a while, it sniffed, then laboriously dragged its weak hind legs closer to the water bowl. As it bent down to lap up the water, its eyes suddenly softened, as if it understood that the man before it was suffering no less than itself. He gently stroked its head and whispered, "You've had it rough just like me, haven't you?" And so, against the slowly fading sunset, the distance between two lonely souls, a man with a torn heart and a crippled animal, quietly vanished, leaving only steady breathing and the gentle lapping of waves beneath the bamboo bridge. A moment later, on the dirt path leading to the house, the figure of a woman appeared. The late sunlight shone on her old conical hat, stretching her shadow long across the ground. When she drew near, the little dog Bibi was already curled safely in the man's lap, eyes half closed in trust. She looked at the scene and broke into a warm smile. He smiled back, no words needed. Together, they pushed the handcart loaded with fresh areca nuts out to the drying yard. The dry nuts clacked against one another, while their laughter rang clear across the wide courtyard. As she worked, she said, "So many nuts today. We're lucky to get hired." Sweat ran down her neck, glistening in the afternoon light. He looked at her with an unusually tender gaze, as if that single moment were enough to make him forget all weariness. When the sky turned purple, they returned to the old house. The moment the door opened, the smell of damp earth and layers of old memories rushed in, tightening his chest. She stepped inside first, taking the bunch of keys he handed her, and said softly, "You still remember where the keys are kept, don't you?" He He smiled, a smile tinged with sadness. How could I forget? The two sat on the porch, talking about past floods, about the fish pond that was now only a patch of mud. He spoke of the new road that would soon cut this land in half. But when he mentioned Ms. Tieu, his voice suddenly dropped. She looked at him for a long time, then took his hand. Her hand was small, but warm enough to soothe the coldness inside a man who thought himself already hardened to sorrow. Wind from the river made the coconut trees sway. Amid the rustling leaves, the two of them seemed to understand that everything would eventually change. Yet genuine feelings could still stand firm through any storm. In the back garden, the late sunlight poured over the vegetable beds, making the purple eggplants and the green gourd trellis glow more vividly. They walked and picked together. Every fruit was plump, dropping into the bamboo basket with a satisfying plop. Tomorrow we'll take these to the market, and they'll sell out fast. These ones are really sweet, she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with rare childlike joy. He looked at her, and his heart skipped a beat. In a life filled with loss, her simple nature made him feel he had finally found a place to come home to. They sat beneath the big tree in the middle of the garden. He gently massaged her shoulders, his rough hands gliding lightly over skin still scented with the day's sweat. She closed her eyes and sighed in relaxation. Then she turned around, placed her tiny hands on his shoulders, and rubbed gently. Tell me if anywhere hurts. Around them, there was only the drone of cicadas and their breathing mingling together. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, scattering shimmering patterns across both their faces. In that moment, all worries about the land they were about to lose, about an uncertain future, everything melted away. Only two once broken people remained, trying to love once more. But that peace did not last long. A shrill woman's voice suddenly tore through the air. "What on earth are you two doing?" They startled and turned. Ms. Tieu, his ex-wife, stood there, eyes sharp enough to shred the whole garden. Her lips pressed tight, voice dripping with contempt as she pointed straight at the girl beside him. "Get out of my house right now." He jumped up, every muscle tight with pent-up anger. "You left this house to run off with someone else for 3 whole years. What are you doing coming back now?" She gave a cold laugh. "I'm still the legal wife. This land still has my share." The venomous words poured out. She mocked him for being poor, having no future, clinging only to empty kindness. The new girlfriend trembled as she listened, but finally replied calmly, "Being rich in money, but poor in conscience, that's what's truly frightening." Miss Tieu narrowed her eyes, smirking sarcastically. "You'll leave him just like I did." The air grew heavy, as if rain were about to fall. He gripped his girlfriend's hand tightly and said, each word deliberate, "Everything will be settled in court. You no longer have any rights here." Ms. Tieu screamed a few more threats, then stormed off. Her shadow stretched long across the old garden, leaving a chill that spread through the late afternoon. When darkness fell, the two of them walked to the riverbank. Each footstep felt heavy, carrying all the pain they had just endured. The wind blew hard, tossing her hair wildly. He pulled her down onto the grass where the water reflected a blazing red sunset. She lowered her head, voice choking. "I feel so awkward and troubled." He lifted her chin, looking deep into her eyes. "In my heart, there is only you and little Maya. Don't worry." But she was still anxious. What if she still wants to hold on to you? He shook his head, speaking slowly but firmly. "Even if the river runs dry and the stones wear away, I will only ever love you." He picked a mayflower, swaying by the water's edge, and gently tucked it into her hair. "This flower is pretty, but not as pretty as you." Her face flushed, eyes glistening as if about to cry. Beneath the fiery red sky, schools of fish glimmered in the river, bearing witness to their promise. He held her tight. Warmth spread through their thin clothes, chasing away the last traces of unease. Only the sound of two hearts beating in unison and the gentle lapping of waves against the bank remained. Night deepened as they returned to their new little house, small but brimming with hope. On the front step lay a quiet package. She stopped, eyes wide with surprise. "Who left this here?" He frowned, then smiled softly. "Probably Maya's grandfather. It's been a long time since he visited." A warmth mixed with slight confusion rose in her heart. They carried the package inside and lit the dim oil lamp. Bibi dragged itself over to greet them, tail wagging weakly. She picked the dog up and whispered, "Were you good today?" He poured water for Bibi, gazing tenderly at his two little family members cuddling together. They sat side by side, talking about the old grandfather who still loved his granddaughter, about the grandmother who once chased mother and child away. Her voice grew softer, heavy with regret. He took her hand gently, slowly. "Everything will be all right." Outside, a light rain began to fall, pattering on the tin roof like a lullaby, putting sorrow to sleep. The poor little house suddenly felt extraordinarily warm, thanks to the breath of three lives clinging to one another amid life's harsh current. Night settled in. The cooking fire crackled, filling the air with the fragrance of fried eggs, herbs, and golden fried garlic. She deftly stir-fried water spinach, while he set out bowls and chopsticks, occasionally teasing her. Their gentle laughter echoed through the small house. "You fry eggs so well. I might finish Maya's portion too." She playfully swatted his shoulder, cheeks pink. Bibi lay dozing by the fire, eyes following their every movement. Steaming rice, fresh green vegetables, golden eggs. Such simple things were enough to make the whole world pause inside this little leaf-roofed house. They ate slowly, looking at each other through the rising steam, eyes speaking 1,000 words of love. "No matter how poor we are, I'll take care of you and the little one," he said, voice low and warm, but full of resolve. She smiled, tears shining. "As long as we still love each other, that's enough." Outside, the rain had stopped. The moon hung suspended above the vast river. Moonlight slipped through the door crack, illuminating two calm faces overflowing with happiness. Dinner ended, but the love between them had only just begun. A love that needed no money, no mansion or car, only calloused hands clasped tight and hearts that had chosen to stay together until the end of their days. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the window, falling on their faces. Together, they went to the riverbank, where the clear water sparkled, reflecting the blue sky and leaning coconut trees. Maya ran and jumped beside them, laughing brightly, pulling Bibi along in its slow but joyful steps. He bent down, picked up a smooth pebble, and skipped it lightly across the water. The splash echoed through the wide sky, reminding them that life, however hard, still held quiet moments to savor. She stood beside him, his hand resting on her shoulder, watching their daughter and the little dog. One look, and all the recent fears and worries seemed to dissolve. They talked about the future. Small plans: rebuild BB's pen, fix the old kitchen, plant more greens. Each simple plan carried hope and unspoken bonding. Then one afternoon, they received a strange parcel, a letter with no signature, just a few scrawled lines mentioning the old land and family matters. Her hands trembled as she held it. He gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's all right. Everything will be fine." He opened the parcel. Inside were a few small items, as if to remind them they were not entirely alone. In that moment, they looked at each other and saw the strength of true feeling. No grand promises, only presence, empathy, and patience through hardship. BB slowly dragged itself over, sniffed each item, wagged its tail weakly. They laughed. Even though it was just a small dog, the love for it was enough to show that family, even strange or imperfect, could exist through love and care. One drizzly evening, they lit the kitchen fire. The scent of sticky rice and curry filled the air. She cooked. He set the table. The whole family gathered close. Maya giggled and bounced to the rhythm of rain on the roof. BB rested against her leg, eyes half closed. He looked at her, eyes full of affection. "No matter how hard life gets, I'll get through it with you and Maya." She smiled and took his hand. "As long as we're together, everything else is small." The space was warm. The crackle of fire and patter of rain on tin roof formed a melody of peace amid a chaotic world. Sometimes happiness is just these simple things: eating together, laughing together, enduring hardship together, while keeping faith in love. Day after day, they worked side by side, tending vegetables, caring for BB and Maya. Every footstep on the red dirt road, every drop of sweat, reminded them of the past and wounds not yet healed. But above all, they learned to live in the present, to love unconditionally, to cherish small moments. In the fiery red glow of sunset, he would often pull her to the riverbank where fish leapt joyfully and say, "Look, life is still beautiful, even when we get hurt." She would only smile and place her hand in his. "Yes, as long as we have each other, everything is worth it." Under the eaves, BB dozed, Maya giggled, and the little house was no longer just a temporary shelter. It had become a true home. Though worries still surrounded them, they found peace in simple things: a meal, a smile, a held hand. Their story is not only one of romantic love, it is proof of the power of patience, trust, and sincere feeling. A man who once lost everything. A woman who entered his life not only with love, but with understanding, calmness, and courage. A little girl and a small crippled dog, though weak or disabled, also helped create that happiness. Those ordinary moments, dinner, falling rain, blazing sunset on the river, all became precious. They remind us that no matter how troubled life is, sincere love can endure, and sometimes the smallest things are the strongest pillars of happiness. When night fell, they sat together. BB's eyes fluttered shut. Maya slept soundly on the bed, and he held her hand. Amid the whispering river wind and the flickering firelight, all worries seemed to fade. That little scarred family had found a place to belong, a place to love and be loved, no matter what trials lay ahead. The story follows a lonely man who forms a
một
bond
bà mẹ
with a
đơn thân, một con
paralyzed
thú đầy đau
dog,
khổ trở về lông trắng thú
connecting
cùng con
two
mình và bất ngờ
isolated
phát hiện nơi đây
souls.
đã được
He and a
Alex,
young woman work
một
hard
người đàn
together,
ông tốt bụng và tài năng,
returning to their
âm
old
thầm
house,
tu sửa,
tending the
trong khi
garden,
Tử
and
La chăm
sharing
chỉ làm việc
peaceful
để
moments
xứng đáng với tấm
despite
lòng của anh,
poverty.
thì chị gái của Alex
Their
lại phản đối,
relationship
cho rằng
is
cô không
tested
xứng đáng
when
với
the
hai mình.
ex-wife returns,
Cùng lúc đó,
claiming
Alex
the
luôn lo
land
lắng
and
cho sự an
sparking
toàn và
tense
sức khỏe của Tử
confrontations.
La, thậm chí nhắc
Still,
nhở cô về việc
love
phải đi
and
bộ con đường
sincerity
dài
guide
cùng
them
con
to
nhỏ.
protect each other
Những lần gặp
and
gỡ,
little
họ
Maya.
đều ấm áp, nhưng
Sweet
vẫn bị che
moments
phủ bởi
during
những tình
evening
cảm
meals
chưa nói ra
under
và
the
sự phản đối từ
sunset
gia đình.
and in gentle rain
Ở
capture
nhà,
their
Alex phải
enduring
đối mặt
bond.
với sự cương quyết của chị
Through
gái,
these
yêu cầu
trials,
giữ
the
anh giữ
story
khoảng cách,
highlights how
nhưng
love,
sâu trong lòng,
trust,
anh biết mình
and
đang quan tâm
care
đến Tử
can
La nhiều
triumph
hơn
over
những gì thừa nhận.
challenges,
Quyết tâm thay
showing that
đổi
even
cách
in
nhìn của gia
hardship,
đình, Alex âm thầm
genuine
lên kế hoạch chứng
connection
minh giá
and
trị của Tử
devotion
La, đồng thời lặng lẽ
provide
theo dõi
warmth,
và bảo vệ cô từ
hope,
xa.
and the courage to face life storms together.